Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Places We'll Go show. Another day, another powerhouse marketer. We're very privileged to have Catherine Newman with us today. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, good morning.
Fantastic to have you with us. A hugely experienced marketer. I always flag this, but another Marketing Academy fellow alumni, along with Richie and myself, both products of the Marketing Academy. An illustrious marketing career, no less. Started out Financial Times, 12 years, ending as Global Brand Director, no less. We're at News UK, so flipped industries for 5 years, CMO of Times and Sunday Times. But the bit that really spikes my interest, and people who know me will know this well, that I'm an absolute sports nut, much to my wife's annoyance. And so you've worked with probably two of the world's most famous sports brands in Man United and WWE. And so I think this is going to be an amazing conversation, learning about marketing both sides of the pond, what sport can learn from other industries and vice versa, and in general, what you've learned throughout your career. And also what I know of you is you're a lovely person, very grounded, but super, super sharp. So this is going to be a great conversation. And so welcome again.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I am a long-time listener, long-time friend. So yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Oh, Catherine, music to our ears. Thank you very much. I love when you say good morning, because clearly it's not good morning for us, because you're stateside at the moment. So how's things over the other side of the pond?
Cold. So we have, you guys have been having almost a heat wave in London while it's been really cold over here. But life is good. Life is good. We are about 18 months into our US journey, which has been fun for us as a family. Doing a relocation is always harder than it looks, but it's been lots of fun as well. So yeah, took the girls off to school, saw the yellow buses go past. It's still a bit like a movie sometimes, but yes, all good here. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a lovely entry point, living life like a movie. And that's such an archetypal thing, the yellow school bus. We'll maybe get into relocation, because many people at points in their career may be facing that particular challenge. But let's go all the way back to the beginning. And the age-old question, how the hell did you get into marketing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I blame my parents entirely. So my dad did a physics degree at Manchester University, and he got a job on the Unilever graduate scheme, and he ended up transferring off it because he was there as a physicist and making washing powders and stuff like that, and he was more interested in what was on the label. And anyway, he moved to British Posters, moved to what was ITV, met my mum. So both of them were working in TV, and then eventually he moved to newspapers. And so I grew up hearing the words Murdoch McLennan, Rupert Murdoch, Robert Maxwell, and sometimes even speaking to him on the phone as a kid, which was always interesting. And it got exposed to it from a really young age. So whilst this may sound a little bit weird, but, around the family table, we would talk about different things in business. My mum and dad would always bring that into the conversation, which was great. So it wasn't just how was school, but it was, I had this meeting and we discussed this. And so I loved it. And I did an internship at one particular newspaper, loved it, went to Loughborough University, learned more about marketing, and then did my CIM postgrad in my first job, which was great. And then started at the Financial Times. At that time, I was in logistics, but every time I would speak to the retailers, so I'd go and visit the newsagents, about 30 to 40 a day, and they'd be telling me that the quality of their posters wasn't good enough. And, whenever we raised the price, they had an issue with talking to customers. And so I just gradually moved over to that side. And I was very grateful to Frances Brindle and Esther Jackson, who were the CMO and marketing director at the time in the FT. And they said, what are you doing in logistics? Like, you should be over here. It's much more fun in marketing. And I was like, oh, yes, it does seem to be actually. So I hopped over and started working with them and just loved it. And I'm one of these nerdy people that, I get stuck in Charleston Airport and I'll buy a leadership or a marketing book. And, you know, I read around the subject. So I did my fellowship at the Marketing Academy, and I love it. I think good marketing is a privilege to do. And I think, you know, we have a lot of power with what we do, because what we do is so, you know, consumer facing. So I take it seriously, and I love it.
Oh, Catherine, wow, there's so many things to get into there. And I love the thought that, you know, Around the Family Table has created an influence for you, which has enabled you to kind of forge a career in those sort of areas. I'm intrigued, actually. You know, you talk about being a bit of a learning geek, you know, in way that you're constantly curious about life and how it impacts marketing, and as you described with those books. So what does influence you? What do you do to kind of feed that curiosity, to kind of always keep close to the consumer?
So I'm a naturally curious person. One boss said to me, he said, "You're just driven by why." He was like, "You're still like my 5-year-old kid that goes, why? Hopefully not as annoying. But I think in another life I would be a psychologist or something, because I think consumer behavior is really interesting. And I think as a marketeer, if you're not interested in that, I'm kind of not sure what you're doing here. Which is why I guess I've ended up working with fans, having started with consumers, then moving to subscribers, and then getting to fans, because that's the ultimate emotional relationship in marketing, which I love. And so I'm very much driven by the why. I also think there's a right and a wrong way with marketing. I think we hold great responsibility in terms of how we deliver public messaging, how we talk to consumers, how we educate. And I have 2 daughters, 9 and 6, and it matters to them how, you know, they are communicated to by brands. And so when they talk about Taylor Swift and some of the things which she's done, like making sure, you know, 90% of her restrooms at a concert are female, reflecting the, you know, the demographics of her audience. That's smart. It's not been done before, though. So I think, you know, marketing has got the power to change the world. I'm much smarter people have said that before me, but when I heard it, I was like, yes, I really like that, and that really makes sense to me.
Love the driven by why, and the curiosity. I think that is the core part of any decent marketer's toolkit. But like, since you opened the door and started talking about fans, I'm going to wade into the sports scene, and I suppose specifically, what attracted you to sport, and how did you make that jump across? Because in the fellowship, we've got Ellie Norman, we've got Claire Cronin, we've got yourself, who have traversed from not in sport to being in sport. And I know a lot of people, including myself, will be curious and interested. So how did you make that conversion, and how did you find it moving into sports marketing?
So a very lovely recruiter actually piqued my interest, because they said, "Have you ever thought about sport?" And I was very honest and said, no, you know, I was kind of born into publishing. This is what I do. This is what we do as a family. So no, I haven't considered sport, although I've been a long-term Chelsea fan for years. So, but the recruiter said to me, and what has actually proven very true, was that there's a lot sport can learn from marketing, and there's a lot that sport can learn from consumer. So, and a lot the consumer can learn from sport. And so when I had my first interview with Manchester United, they wanted someone who was able to develop reoccurring revenue streams. So, to be honest, more than a season ticket, because, you know, for the top 10 clubs, selling season tickets aren't hard, and you've got very long waiting times. And, you know, I think the average age of a Liverpool supporter is like 120 or something. You know, people don't give up their seats. So, so they wanted someone that understood reoccurring revenue streams. So that meant, you know, deep CRM capability. It also meant, do you understand how to acquire new customers, which of course, at the Times and at the Financial Times, it was all about global reach. It was all about using social, yes, but at the same time, to be honest, if you weren't getting addressable audiences that you knew how to monetize, then, to be honest, Mr. Merck wasn't like, yay, we got 1 million likes. He was like, I want to hear we've got 1 million subscribers. And so it was understanding that the skill set which I had was actually very easy to transfer over to sport. And likewise, I would then go far deeper with, for example, CRM and loyalty, because working with fans, of course, some of those fans are born into that club because their parents say, you're Jewish and you're a Manchester United fan, and you're going to this school and these are your grandparents. It's kind of that kind of conversation. So I was very lucky that they took a chance on me. Still one of the best jobs I've ever had. Super, super people there. Ellie's in very good hands, and I know she's doing a great job there as well. But it's a phenomenal place to work. And they were hungry because they said, look, we've got a reach of over 1.1 billion, but we don't have that many people on our database. And actually, maybe if we'd have done that, we would have had a very different business model. And so when I had my interview with Mr. Glazer for 2.5 hours, I actually came out of the tandem suite, as it was called, and Old Trafford was shut. I was like, does anyone know I'm still here? And it was phenomenal. But we talked about every single facet of marketing, every single facet. How we could use data science, how we could make sure that we were educating people on Manchester United. And what a big part of the conversation was, and something which that really framed our thinking, was I said to him, why did you buy Manchester United? You could have bought other clubs at the time. What is it about you and Manchester United fans that make it so special? And it was going into that kind of thing that was just so interesting. And we'd done it a bit in my previous roles, but actually sport just took it to a whole other level. So it was everything that I'd learned with trying to answer that big question, which made it huge amounts of fun.
Wow, what a journey. I mean, incredible. And I think the skill sets, as you've described, really translated super well from publishing into sport, although you wouldn't necessarily think at the outset. What I'm intrigued about is when you said that during that discussion, you spoke about every part and facet of marketing, and of course how that then influences the fan base to achieve that 1.1 billion reach, as you described. And it brings me to a point or thought in and around the role of the CMO, and how do you actually become an effective CMO? Because it's practically almost impossible for one person to know every single facet of marketing. I mean, I would hazard a guess that it's virtually impossible. So how do you then think about a CMO and the skills that you need to bring in order to be effective in that role?
So I think what you said there was really key. Don't assume you know everything, because the chances are you don't. So one of the things, or part of the challenge with joining Manchester United was building the marketing team. So, surround yourself by experts, bring in great people who challenge you. Don't bring in lookalikes, because that never works. And so that was a key part of my role. The second thing was, and again, depending on the kind of organization that you go into, respect the legacy. So don't go in and say, gosh, why have you all been doing it this way? I would have done it this way. Because Manchester United, they would say, well, we were busy winning the treble. So there were very good reasons for other things that were going on. So understanding the legacy and understanding that it's evolution, it's not revolution. And I think to understand that it is about testing, learning, and evolving the business model and the marketing, I think is key. And then thirdly, for me, it was also understanding and demonstrating how marketing can be a force for good in the business. Let's be honest, any CMO can come in and spend money. Yeah, and let's be honest, that's what the finance community and others think we do anyway. The last thing you want to do is go in and prove them right. So I remember when I had a meeting with Richard Arnold, I said to him, yes, I would like some money. But I said, give me £5,000 a week. That's it. I'll show you what I can do with that. I will demonstrate a positive ROAS. And so again, with a very good team, we educated the club and they educated us for sure, but we were actually able to demonstrate the benefits of what good marketing could do. And so a key example was our e-commerce business, which we specifically focused the spend on. We doubled the revenue, and I'm obviously talking millions here. We doubled the revenue in year one, and we doubled the revenue again in year two. Now, don't get me wrong, this was a cross-club effort, and it's one that still continues today. But the spark was from the team that we built. And it was great. It was a good learning all round for everybody. And I said, look, stop trying to give me a budget, give me a P&L, and I'll treat it like a bank account. The more we put in, the more that we can invest. And so it was a different learning for all of us. So I think for me, certainly my experience as a CMO is, yes, come in and talk as a marketeer because that's the expertise, but understand the language of business, understand the key metrics that people are wanting to drive, understand what it will take to make them the hero of their own narrative, which was probably some of the best advice I was ever given. And if you can do that, then you won't find that marketing has to knock down the door. You'll find that people are asking you to come in, which is ultimately, I think, where you want to be.
Listen to you, Catherine. Actually, just going to go one back. I didn't know you were a Chelsea fan, so that must have been a thing, being when you were a Chelsea fan. Anyway, regards to the last question, I mean, what you said, there's some great pearls of wisdom, not least don't recruit lookalikes and respect legacy. Everything you have said is not to say is what I expect you to say, but extremely sensible, logical, rational, coherent, and smart. I'm interested about risk taking, because we've had a guest recently who just said profitability and success is a function of risk, taking risks. And so where does risk fit into the model or the equation or the environment for you?
I think calculated risk is something that a CMO or someone in marketing deals with every day. I mean, to be honest, the first risk I took was joining the club. Likewise for them. I think people assume that risk is always one way. It's you taking the risk. It's not. Risk is very rarely personal. It is a shared experience. And so, risk has to be calculated every single time. And I would just say that, and certainly the way that, for example, my husband and I, when we said, okay, we're going to relocate, and obviously that's a risk for the family, I've always thought, what can I lose here? What can I lose that would hurt? And what can I not lose? And so therefore, then there's degrees of which you're prepared to wager that. And likewise, there are things you can do to mitigate risk. If you educate the business and say, look, this is going to be a bit different. We've never done this before. And sometimes you've got to say, I just think in my gut that it's right. You can say that in sport because you know what, that halftime team talk, there's no graphs, there's no, oh, look, the stats have shown this. It's not. It's the manager going in and giving them hell or lifting them up. And so sometimes it is gut, sometimes it is emotion, and that comes with experience, right? And it also comes with making some mistakes and having some wins and losses. But for me, risk taking is all down to what you're prepared to lose, when, how, and what you can live with.
I love that thinking. Risk is all down to what you'd be prepared to lose. I think that's great. My alter ego, my little secret is that I always have this desire to one day live in the States for a little while. I don't know why. My wife's not particularly amenable, so I'm not sure it'll ever happen. But there you go. But it's just one of those things on the bucket list. And I'd love to get your perspective about how you made the transition. And I'm sure it might be on other people's minds going over from one pond to the over in the direction. So what's your take?
You'd think between the US and the UK there would be less differences than there are. We speak the same language. From a political point of view, we talk about the special relationship. And yet, there are some very big cultural differences. Some are funny and you can kind of laugh at. So I remember when I was in a meeting with the CEO and they asked me if I wanted a drink, and just flippantly I said, I'd love a brew. And a brew over here is a beer. And, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And and I thought for a second and I said, do you have any tea? And they were like, you mean tea? And then, of course, it was then, do you want iced tea? I was like, no, I don't want iced tea. I want hot tea. And, of course, it was this whole big thing. But it was amazing that kind of shortcut of difference. I found it interesting from a work point of view. I also worked in WWE. It has a particular culture. And so I would say it's fairly unique, whether you're UK or US. But certainly the children have found it quite interesting. So they were in a school with a school uniform. Over here, they don't have a school uniform. They've found it with the language quite different. So a full stop is a period over here, and the way that, the vocab of maths and things like that. So to be honest, when you relocate, there's two things that really guided whether I was going to be able to stay. And one was more important than the other. The first one was, are the family happy? So for example, my husband had to give up his job in order for us to move over here, and he wasn't allowed to work for the full year. He's a very qualified, very educated man, and he was now doing the school run. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a privilege to spend time with your kids, but it was also, as a consequence of our moving. So the first question was, are the family happy? The second one was, can I do the job, and can I do the job within this culture? And they're not mutually exclusive. And actually, one can erode the other. And of course, you are, if you remember your first day at school or your first day at uni, imagine doing that, but taking your family on that journey. It's a lot of pressure. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Don't regret it. Having an amazing time. But a good friend of mine who's moved about 4 times now, she said to me, the first year is great because it's loads of fun. The second year is the hardest. And then the third year is when you'll decide whether you're staying or going home. And we're in our second year, and I would say it has definitely been harder. I mean, our first week, we went to LA, and my daughter shared her 8th birthday party with Snoop Dogg and Jojo Siwa. Yeah, that was great fun for her. Her 9th birthday was a little different. So, it's not for the faint-hearted. The recruiter said to me about 50% of people accept a relocation, never actually make it, which I thought was quite interesting. And I can see why. But we've personally loved the journey. And, if you can give your kids a great education, that's one thing. If you can give them a great life education, that's awesome. And actually, before we went, we bought each of our girls a copy of the book, The Places We'll Go. And we had it inscribed with a poem that we'd written for them. And we said, this is a family adventure. Let's see where we'll go. So we're treating it as that at the moment.
What a lovely touch. Another homage too. You talk about pressure. I mean, Upstick's husband has to take a hiatus here. Kids have to deal with all sorts. So no pressure at all. But I remember going to see a musical about Henry Fraser on the West End recently. He was sadly paralysed from the neck down in an accident, but turned his life into something amazing. And there was this expression in that, no pressure, no diamonds, which I think is great. So how do you will have faced extreme pressure. So how do you deal with pressure? What's the coping mechanisms?
It's a good question. I tend to go quite quiet. I take a moment. For someone that has worked with some extreme personalities, I am someone that will internalize it for a moment. I learned early on that how you control how you respond to something is key. And so I will internalize it, and I will try and rationalize it. I will try to give myself a good talking to at times. So I, will tell myself it doesn't matter what people think, and all that kind of good stuff. But I'll be honest, it's something that I work on a lot. So I listen to the High Performance podcast. I listen to Mel Robbins, and, they talk a lot about how you can deal with pressure and, some of the tricks where you can go into the ladies' room before and be like, and all this kind of good stuff and kind of try and channel it. I think the honest answer is that I've learned by making mistakes. I've learned through experience. I've had some days in the office that I would never want to repeat or wish on my worst enemy, and that I wish I could go over and do again. But also I've realised that, I need to look myself in the mirror, and that's in my family. And therefore, if I can do that while managing the pressure, then that's good. And I've probably just become perhaps a little bit better of knowing my boundaries as I get older. So, some pressure is self-inflicted when you're trying to grow your career, the hours that you put in, the miles you're prepared to do. And I think I've realised that it's perhaps not about working harder, it's about working smarter, and that helps with the pressure. And I would say to anyone that's dealing with it, rationalise it as much as you can. It's a bit like the risk, decide the bits that you can control, decide the bits that are emotional, and then decide the bits that really need action. As my mum said to me, she said, Catherine, if you were on a plane and you saw the pilot running down the other way saying we're all doomed, it's going to scare the shit out of everyone. So you know what? Learn how to manage pressure, work out what's important, and take it from there. And I was like, that's probably quite a good analogy.
Wow, yes, that's a strong visual, by the way.
It is. She hates flying, so it's.
I love when you said, learn by making mistakes, and there'll be times when you wish you could sort of do things slightly differently. It reminded me of the movie About Time. I'm not sure if you've come across it or seen it, but it's one of the most wonderful movies out there, and it's definitely a family one, and one that I really resonate with. So if you haven't, it's one to put on your list. There we go.
I will do.
You must.
It's Richard Curtis's favourite film. It is an absolute belter. I'm with you, Richie. I'm very jealous of you now, Catherine. You get to watch it with fresh eyes in a way that obviously Richie and I now can't.
Exactly. But I must admit that I have been a wrestling buff ever since I was in my early teens. And so I just want to ask, who is your favorite wrestler? And tell me why. What's intrigued you about them?
So I was lucky enough to work with Mr. Cena when I was there. And, he's called one of the all-time greats because, in all honesty, he is. He's got an insane work ethic, is deeply driven by his work with creating the wishes for obviously terminally ill children. He's very disciplined. To be honest, with all the superstars, with anyone in sport, they really are at the peak of their game. So the dedication and the discipline that it takes, I would say never go to lunch with them because it's no fun. The conversation's great, but you'll be on water and boiled chicken. So he's phenomenal. And also, ever since he left, he's always come back at least once a year. And so I remember someone saying to me, you'll never get an A-lister in the same room as a Z-lister or someone trying to make it. That's definitely not the case with Mr. Cena, or actually with any of the superstars. They absolutely remember where they've came from, and are very loyal, and that speaks a lot, I think, to the business that they run, which is great. So yeah, he's pretty awesome, I have to say. And plus, when he went to London, he said that WrestleMania should go to London, which was then discussed in Parliament, which was rather fun. So yeah, I love seeing that. He's definitely got a mischievous side for sure.
Yeah, amazing.
They remember where they came from. Lovely thoughts. You said about marketing changing the world at the beginning. That lived with me. Tell me more.
So it was interesting when we were at Advertising Week in New York in October. My daughter was on a panel. And it was slightly scary seeing her up there. She was only 9. The next youngest, I think, was 14. And but we all got talking about, how you influence younger generations and things like that. And what struck me was actually how much marketers need to spend to the power of language and the words that we use. Now, my 9-year-old is heavily influenced by things that she sees, but more so by things that she hears. And so when you look back through the ages, and I've worked with some very smart people, a lot smarter than me on this, and they talk about the power of language throughout the years. When you think about marketing, at its heart, we are curating messages all the time. We're trying to appeal to the consumer, sometimes to persuade them to buy something that they never knew they even needed, but sometimes trying to actually meet their needs. And so language for me is incredibly important. And I love politics. If I had my time again, I'd be prime minister or something. My mum still has a bet. I think I was about 5. She put on a bet so I was going to be prime minister. I have to say, I don't think that's going to happen. But the power of language is incredibly important. And so I remember when I was at the Times, we actually looked at the language that we use within our marketing. And without changing the imagery, we just changed our messaging. And we got our churn down to the lowest in our history, which was amazing. Our social was more impactful, but more importantly, it also changed the way that we would write headlines in the newspaper. And I remember the editor saying to me, whoever holds the pen holds great responsibility. And so it matters the headlines that you read. And it's the same for marketing. If you put something out and, more than you see it, you need to make sure that it's, delivering the message in a truthful and an honest way. And so when we were at Advertising Week in New York, they said, what promise do you make to your daughter? And I said, I make the promise that in any company that I ever work in, the language that we use will be empowering. It will lift you up. It won't tell you how to lose 7 pounds in 7 days and you feel terrible after day 2 because you've only lost half a pound. It will use the words how to live healthier, how to live better, all these kind of empowering words that we can use. And as marketeers, we really should make sure that we do that. It's not about, can we sell something to somebody that they don't need or they haven't got the money to afford. That's not what good marketing does. And so that's why I think when you look at marketing, whether it be in politics or consumer or sport, you've got the opportunity to leave someone better than you found them, and you should take that every single time.
Catherine, what a lovely nugget. And I love that thought. We've never really had anyone talk around the power of language and the nuance about how we, and the responsibility. He who holds the pen holds great responsibility, as you describe. I think it's so, so important. You really, brought that to life for me in that moment. I want to come back to the thought that you said at the outset in and around the progression from consumer to subscriber to fan. I think that's really important. And then perhaps talk to the last part around fans and share with us your experience of how do you create a sense of fandom?
So again, to come back, when we were at United and again at WWE, we didn't concern ourselves so much with what are people doing when they're here, but we were saying, why do they come here? Why do they choose us? And therefore, how can you make sure that you earn that every day? I remember Stephanie McMahon saying to me, it's a privilege to have the fans that we do, and we should earn their respect and their loyalty every single day that we sit in these seats. And that's a mentality that they have in sport. So, if you look at consumers, they perhaps have a one-time need. If you look at subscribers, they're wanting to develop a habit. But if you look at fans, they have an emotional connection to you that could be intergenerational. And so what we did was at United and both at WWE, we made sure we understood that on a deeply psychological level. So what we were then able to do was to pattern match what we were doing in order to meet that. So it wasn't, what do I want to sell them, but what do they want to buy? And again, a subtle difference, but a key difference. And so that was even down to the language. So I know people say, oh, we'll send out a CRM email and we'll change the different images that we'll use, or we'll change where the button is and things like that. I would ask them, are you starting from where the consumer is at that time of day, in that location, when they receive that messaging? Because if you want to build up fandom, understand how somebody feels 2 hours before a match. I mean, Mark, you're a sports fan. 2 hours before the World Cup final and England are in there, like, I'm going to talk to you differently, or I should, versus how I'm going to speak to you a week before, because psychologically you are in a very different mindset. And so that, for me, is what you should do when you're talking to fans. Understand their why, understand that there is legacy there, understand that they will share in your successes, but they'll also wonder why you couldn't have got it right the first time. And so, when we were at United, the way we would send out an email after a win, loss or draw was very different, as it should be. But it's amazing how people don't do that. So that's something which is ingrained in everything that we do. And with WWE, it was exactly the same. When Cody Rhodes lost in the WrestleMania final, so to speak, which it's over 2 nights, it's bigger than the Super Bowl when you look at it over that time period. People were very upset. So the next show that they had on the Monday, I mean, they're literally writing that show 30 seconds before the superstars go into the ring, because they're taking the temperature of the fans in the stadium at that very moment. So it's something that I've been very lucky that the people that I've worked with are experts in this field, but something that we've taken to heart, and we try and speak to the fan on their level, whatever level that is.
Damn, I should have worked in sports marketing, like packaged goods and insurance and banking. Where did I go wrong? I love.
Mark, come on.
No, I'm never actually going to have a proper job again. So that ship has passed. Anyway, I'm very happy to be involved with Sarries Rugby. Now then, you mentioned CIM and obviously the fellowship. So all of your brilliant thinking and impact and success obviously is a function of how you've invested in yourself and development. School of Marketing is all about helping people to develop themselves. So tell me a bit about the way you approach continuous development. And if you wanted to talk about what the fellowship year meant to you, that would be okay as well.
Well, the fellowship year was, I know I've sworn once, but am I allowed to swear on here?
Of course.
Go ahead.
Fucking amazing. It was the best thing I've ever done. It was pivotal. To be honest with you, the people that I met through the academy, it was thanks to them that I had the confidence to even pursue the Manchester United opportunity, because I was, this is who I am, this is what I do, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember somebody saying to me, aren't you sick and tired of going into the same room, having the same conversations and knowing the answers? Don't you want to go into a room and be scared? And I was a bit like, not sure about that, but yes, that does sound, quite interesting. So the academy was fantastic, and CIM was as well. It was, some good theory. I met some good people on there, and it was great fun. And, both CIM and the Academy have given me a shortcut, or a shorthand, I should say. So if you are thinking of relocating and you have something like the CIM and you have something like the Academy, when you speak to a recruiter over here, they're like, fantastic, well done. So they instantly recognize it, which is great. Whereas you have to explain A-levels and GCSEs and all that kind of good stuff. So the Academy was phenomenal in that regard. It also, I think, awakened my need to just continually work on me. So I've had lots of interesting leadership opportunities. I've managed lots of teams. I've loved every minute of it. One of my favorite things is managing a team. I consider it a real privilege to work with people. But it also meant that, I've always been quite curious and hungry about what I do. So, for example, I will read Atomic Habits because I'm interested in how you develop habits. And for example, my girls are 9 and 6. I used to be quite athletic before them. I hadn't been recently, shall we say. And so Atomic Habits talks about, if you want to start a new habit, attach it to one that already exists, which is pretty smart when thinking about, subscribers or fans. And so I love content. So I got a Peloton, and so I now watch CNN. I now listen to a podcast, and I run about 5 to 6K a day. Now, I'm sure that's not as many as some of your listeners, but for me, that's like a marathon. And I do that literally every day now because I've attached it to something which I love. So I'll listen to the High Performance podcast. I'll listen to you guys. And I love it. And it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. And I realized that actually learning for me is something I constantly want to do. So, I will read autobiographies. I will listen to podcasts. I will read books. I'm reading a book called Hidden Potential at the moment, and it's really interesting about how you can, basically find the strength within and to be successful. I'm still asking those questions, and I'm still thinking that I can improve. And particularly if you work in sport, these people improve every single day. When Ronaldo came back to Manchester United, he was the first one at training and he was the last one to leave. That never goes away. And I think if you want to be really good, I've definitely been able to learn something from the people that I've worked with, even if they are amazing athletes and superstars. I've kind of taken that to heart and try and do that myself.
Well, I tell you what, Catherine, there's no better role models, I suspect, than the people that you've worked with in the past. I mean, absolutely incredible. It sucks, but the time has sort of flown by, and I'm gonna have to end the segment here. But it's just been phenomenal to chat with you this morning or afternoon, depending where you are in the world. I loved your last segment where we talked about, don't you want to go into a room and be scared? I really love that sentiment and thought. And I wonder if that's a bit of philosophy that, as you say, have taken and confidence you've gained and garnered from the Academy, but you've taken throughout your life in the sort of moves and that you've been able to make. And I get the real fortunate pleasure of trying to summarize some of these key themes that we spoke about. And I think really it's such a wonderful blend of giving us a masterclass in what marketing should and could be, as well as some of your personal reflections into life, certainly in another country and how that goes. I don't know if you clued in, but as we talked about sort of the three core elements around consumer, subscribers and fans, you said consumers are all about one need or a need in time. Subscribers are about forming a habit, and fans are about a true emotional connection that can even go intergenerational. And what a wonderful way to think about how we can move through that hierarchy as marketers. But going all the way back, I love the thought about how you were driven by why, and that consumer behavior and that level of curiosity that really drives you through everything that you do. You talked about the fandom and fanship being about the ultimate sort of pinnacle of where we can get to in the consumer relationship, because it truly is about the emotional connect. And interestingly, the intersect that you've had that's allowed you, enabled you to get into sport is the thought around the publishing history that you've had, CRM capability, data science, as well as the acquisition loyalty piece that's really held you in good stead when you were moving from one industry to the next. I think that's really sort of insightful about part of that journey. And yet, speaking about reaching the 1.1 billion customers or fans that we say at Man U, and having that thought about how you then dissect every aspect of marketing and bring every angle of marketing to be able to achieve that. But do so in a way that is slightly humbled. In fact, starting with £5,000 per week as a test and test bed, I think is testament to kind of the confidence that you've been able to have in order to know that you can actually do, you can actually create value from even the smallest nuances. You talk about things in and around building the great marketing team. Don't bring people in who are lookalikes. I thought that was really interesting and insightful. Respect the legacy. It's not about evolution, but revolution. Make sure you're testing and learning and experimentation, and that marketing can truly be a force for good. Of course, into the segue around the power of language. He who holds the pen really does hold great responsibility, and us as marketers really, really do. Around calculated risks, and that actually it's not just one-sided, that risks are always two-sided, and that it's a shared responsibility and accountability. But when assessing risks, you must look at what you could lose and what you could lose that actually would hurt. And I think there's a fair nuanced balance between the two. We spoke then about, of course, about the world of relocation. I love that insight from that recruiter that said that 50% of relocation people never actually do make it. And so it is quite the adventure. And also the thought about the 3-year span, excitement, a little bit less. And then, the third year is all about whether you decide to stay or not. I'm intrigued as to which way you're going to go, but only time will tell, I guess. And so it's just, so many wonderful things that we picked up on here today. And I just want to say a massive thank you. It's been an incredible conversation and love every minute of it. Thank you.